I'm in my upper 30s and I'm approaching, where the window is getting shorter, and it's really hard not to think about that. But I'm confident that, if it's meant to be, it will be. And I just have to trust life.
So I am no longer a coffee drinker. Coffee is something I gave up in revamping my diet for my fertility health, which is very hard to do. But luckily, I found something amazing to replace it with, and that's my morning matcha that I use Kuli Moringa for. It gives me that same ritualistic feeling of having something warm in my hands in the morning without the caffeine. And I have loved having that as a replacement for my coffee. I love this product so much. It is delicious. And I honestly don't miss my coffee. So if you want an opportunity to check out Kuli Moringa, you can use our code QTC25 for 25% off your first purchase.
I am so excited to welcome our next guest to the Quiet the Clock podcast, Becky Jefferies. Your story is so incredible, but not only are we going to talk about egg freezing, but I just want to talk about your life in general, because I think you embody a lot of what we talk about on the podcast of sort of living life on your own terms and not subscribing to societal timelines and expectations and pressure. And before we jump into the egg freezing, well, first, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here. It's great to meet you, and great to be here.
So nice to meet you too. I want to jump in first and talk about a post I saw that's pinned on your Instagram, which embodies a lot of what we talk about here. And one of the reasons that I started this podcast was to normalize paths that look different, that life doesn't have to be about checking the boxes that we're told to check. And there was a post that said, if I went through life doing only what the world expects me to do, I would have missed out on so many of these best experiences. And I'd love for you to speak to that, because I love that. And I want to normalize that.
Thank you for calling that out. And thank you for the kind words. When you said that you saw, or you wanted to refer to one of the posts pinned on my profile, I thought you were going straight to the egg freezing one. But that is a very special one, because I have, I would say for a lot of my life, I did what I was told to do and sort of followed the prescription of graduate high school, get good grades, go to college, get a good job, and just sort of tick all the boxes, get married, do all of those things. And in my late 20s, I went on a girls' trip that really opened my eyes. I went to several different countries in Southeast Asia, and I came back from that trip and was like, I have to get out of this country. I need to do something different with my life. I just felt like I was sort of, I was tired of following that prescription of what I'm supposed to do and ticking all of those boxes. And I decided to stop my career, do my MBA overseas. I was already looking at MBA programs at the time. And I looked at that as my opportunity to just get out of the country and experience something different, go abroad, and then see where life takes me. And when I first started that, I expected to go away for a year, get my MBA, and then come right back to the US. And I think I was 2 weeks into having moved to Spain, and I just knew I wasn't going back. It was eye-opening. I was meeting people from so many different countries that were in my program, and it was sort of the most happy and the most free that I had ever felt in my life. And that's sort of what sent me into, it was my launch pad for living abroad, and that eventually turned into living in multiple countries and now living a fully remote life where I am basically living out of a suitcase now, and have been traveling full time for the last, more like almost the last year and a half, since last January. It was last January I moved out of my apartment in Dubai, and I have been living on the road, and I am getting to the point where I would like to settle down, but I am really glad that I took the opportunity to do my own thing, carve my own path, not follow all of the check boxes that we are told we are supposed to tick off. And I have grown a lot from it. And I think had the most fulfilling experiences just by doing the things that I want to do, that I'm learning and growing from, instead of what everybody else, what society or what the world tells me they think I should be doing.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I share a similar journey, and also went abroad right after school and sort of realized
Did you?
that. Yeah, I moved to Portugal right after college, and I think and share with me if you feel similar, but I think it's helpful to get out of the environment that is giving you the narratives and giving you the shoulds, to get that perspective. And I think that was similar for me, because I did all the things and went to college and got the good grades. And I think my first pivot was, moving to Europe right after school, while a lot of my classmates were getting, their entry-level jobs. But I think for me, kind of getting out of that space of where the narratives were being kind of pushed helped me see there's so much more out there. And I wonder, for you, getting out of that environment of like checking the boxes, and was what was eye-opening for you?
It's not that I needed to specifically get out of the US. It was just that I needed change. And I think no matter where you live, it's good for you to get out, live in another country, experience other cultures. And you don't always get that just from traveling for a short period of time or taking a vacation somewhere. So actually like rooting yourself somewhere else, like living those experiences, I think goes a long way. So for me, it was like I had travel experiences that opened my eyes, but it was a lot more impactful when I moved abroad and really, inserted myself and completely turned my life upside down in a good way. So I think that was a big part of what opened my eyes. And another aspect of it, it's not just creating change for yourself and taking yourself out of your routine or your existing environment, but it's also just tuning out what the world is telling you. Yeah. And it doesn't matter where we are. If we're living at home, if we're living abroad, we're still going to be hearing these messages, and the world is still going to have the same set of expectations for us. So there's definitely an element of doing your own thing and just having to tune it out and do what you know is best for you. And I think for the most part, whether it's your family or colleagues or friends, wherever these messages are coming from, they're always with good intent. And, especially your parents, when they're telling you what you should do, they absolutely say those things with the best of intentions because they think they know best. But I have learned that only you know what is best for you. And it's good it's nice to have a support system, and it's nice to have guidance and advice and people who really care about you and your well-being. But ultimately, only you know what is really best for you.
Yeah. And I think I was laughing because, I hear my dad's voice in my head being like, we're moving to Europe, the voices are there. Yeah. But my thought on that too is like, they're just passing down the prescription that was handed to them. And I think that it's sort of amazing to sort of break the story and change the narrative that something like moving abroad or living abroad is okay, is great. That can be part of the journey. It doesn't have to be so prescriptive.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And I think we're part of a good generation. I think that we're lucky to be in this generation where we don't have to follow suit. We are challenging the status quo. And I see a lot of that with people in our age group. And I love that. I love that we're doing things differently. And not everyone is choosing to do that, but there are a lot of us who are compared to our parents' generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's nice when you do see other people doing it, because even if it's in your heart, the voices might be too loud and louder than sort of what your authentic self is wanting. So seeing other people do it is almost this permission to go for it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And unlike you, it sounds like when you moved abroad, you did that it was after college in your early 20s, I assume?
Yeah. I honestly, I wish now that I'd done it later in life, because I think I still lack that. I traveled a lot. So I moved abroad with my ex-boyfriend who was playing basketball over there. So, it was what brought me there. And I did travel quite a bit, but I think if I was a little bit older, I might have appreciated it a bit more and maybe rooted and maybe never come back. I don't know. Maybe it was meant to be that way. But I think I was still, for me, like not confident enough. I was too young to really like go out, too much on my own. So I don't regret the experience at all. I wish I'd done it a couple of years later.
Okay. It's interesting you say that, because I was actually going to say, I wish I had done it a little bit sooner, because I didn't move abroad until I was 29. And I had already had like a good chunk of my career behind me. And, I had travel experiences, like you said, but I just think that I really found myself. I did not find myself and really start living until I moved abroad. And, I was 29 when I left the US and moved to Spain, and I was 30 by the time I moved to Dubai. And I just feel like my life kind of started at that point. So the whole timeline got shifted back. And I think that might have a lot to do with, why I'm sort of, I was, that I'm later in life and have not had a family yet. Like my real experiences, the things that I wanted to do, whether it was career related, travel related, or just other things that fulfill me, the timeline was shifted back, because I feel like a lot of it started when I finally left the US at 29.
Yeah. And it sounds like, finally being true maybe to yourself and what you really wanted instead of what you were told to do. And that's, in my opinion, that's when we really start living. I think we can look like we're living, and we can check all the boxes, and externally it looks like we have all the things. But I think until we really can carve our own path and can follow a path that's like true to ourselves is when we really start living. But going abroad earlier and then coming home, I started a job in finance, and I'm like, this is so miserable. I hate this so much. That started my journey to really find what I wanted to do. And my timeline felt shifted back too, because a lot of my friends or classmates from college had kind of like figured out a lot sooner. And they were, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure I know some of them are not entirely happy in those things now, but it took me a while to kind of find what I love to do. 3 masters, lots of school, lots of different jobs to finally, it took me a while. I really had no idea, but I knew I had to love something. I knew I had to, really what the catalyst was my first job out of school was finance, because everyone says you're supposed to go into business, you're supposed to go in finance. Yep. And I just remembered this thought that, and you probably appreciate this, I had 2 weeks vacation was the allotted vacation time. And I was like, I get 10 days minus weekends out of the entire year to choose what I want to do. I was like, no way, not for me. And that started my journey of like finding what I wanted to do. And, I also met my partner at 34, and in like societal standards, I guess that's late in the game. I had my son at 40. So it's part of why I do this podcast is just quieting the narratives, quieting the timelines. Like our timelines are our own. And I think, and I'd be curious, because I liked what you said earlier about tuning out the noise, like how you've been able to do that. Because I think that even when we're fulfilled, or I'll speak for myself, I think there's still opportunity to compare. And I'm curious, I love what you said about tuning out the noise, and I'd love to hear how you do that, because I know it can be hard.
Yeah, it is hard, especially when it's coming from people that you really love. I think about my parents right off the bat when I say that. But I think that a large part of it is just really trusting yourself and having conviction about the path that you're on. And I have had many conversations with my parents. I remember when I was in the thick of my MBA program, I had just turned 30, and I was studying for a really tough exam that was the following day. And I happened to jump on a quick call with my mom, and she just brought up, for some reason, she was talking about my timelines and my biological clock, and saying like, now that you're 30, you should really start thinking about freezing your eggs. And
oh my God, right before this big exam?
Yes. And I was so stressed, and I broke down crying that night, because the stress and that conversation, and my mom telling me, I don't know if you're going to have kids because you're so focused on your career. And I had looked at it all of that time, like I have so much time left. I'm only 30, but it's just a completely, I guess it's recognizing that this is a different generation and their timelines and what they know is completely different than what we know. And I mean, I have a lot of girlfriends that are in their past 40 and having children, and it's very common. And it's more common in Europe too. So it's recognizing that this is just a different perspective and respecting that's okay for them to have that, but that's not my perspective. And I've just had a lot of conviction that I've held on to about being in the right place in my life and being on the right path. And I know that eventually having a family will come. The right time will find its place in my life. And yes, I'm in my upper 30s and I'm approaching, where the window is getting shorter, and it's really hard not to think about that. But I'm confident that, if it's meant to be, it will be. And I just have to trust life. So yeah, I guess it's not so much about like tuning everything out, because it's still there. I still have to hear it, but it's trusting myself.
I love that. And I think without that trust in yourself, it's easy to be susceptible to someone else's anxiety, right? And like you said, it's out of good intention. It's your mother, like, I'm sure, desiring those things for you, or knowing you desire those things and wanting that for you, and maybe her having the anxiety based on the narrative she had. I know, like, my parents got married at 22, 23. It's just like, I would never want to, that wasn't my journey, and I think, again, sharing these stories just normalizes like a new normal, like a new way of doing things. So I guess this is time to pivot to the egg freezing. So before your mom had mentioned that, had you heard anything about egg freezing? Had you even thought about it?
Very little. I just knew what it was. And I cannot recall ever having an in-depth conversation or really learning very much about it. I just knew what I knew what she meant when she said freeze your eggs, but that was about it. And I had not thought about it up to that point. And I'm not sure what planted the seed in her mind. Maybe she had a conversation with someone or watched something, but it was, I would say that was the first time that the seed was really planted, but it was completely off my radar before that. Okay. And even though the seed was planted at that time, it was still at least 5 years until I really thought about it seriously again. So yeah, it was, she had said at that time, the quality of your eggs starts to go down. You become less fertile as you get older. And I don't think I even did research at the time. I just felt like, no, I'm really healthy. I've got time. This is, this is like an older generation's perspective. And so I wasn't really worried about it. And fast forward to last year, I'm at the age of 35 and my marriage was falling apart. So actually between that conversation with my mom and when I started the process last year of freezing my eggs, I met someone, got in a serious relationship, got married. And then, last year the marriage fell apart, and it was that thought about freezing my eggs came back because of that. So
what was that like for you? Because we've had so many women on here, and I know so many stories of women ending relationships in their 30s and then feeling the panic of, the motherhood piece, and just thinking that relationship was going to lead to those things. And then when it doesn't, really starting to feel like the panic of time.
Yeah, that was a very emotional part of it for me. In addition to, just the emotions of that very meaningful relationship falling apart, this extra layer that I felt like I have to worry about this, but he doesn't. Yes. And, the time pressure was really switched on. And I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I played in my mind, like these timelines, like, okay, if it takes me this amount of time to meet someone, and then we have to date for this amount of time before we could get serious. And then like, I'd want to be with them for this amount of time before I would want to have children. And it's like, you start doing the math and it can make you crazy. So
it's terrifying when I had a similar experience, just to share a little with you. So I've been in my partnership now for 9 years, but I met at 34 froze at 37 in that relationship because we weren't aligned on the timeline. But there was sort of a break or make moment where like, are we doing this or not? Because I had a real desire to be a mother. And I did those same, like that same mental math of like, if this relation, and I didn't want the relationship to end. I'm so glad it worked out. It's works out. But same, like, how long to meet somebody? How long do I have to be in a relationship before? And then at that math, I was like 45 years old. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. And I hate that I was thinking about it that way because it goes against my grain. It goes against the things that I was talking about before, about like not following anyone else's timeline and prescription. And, but it's, if you want to do things the right way, presumably you would, have enough time to get to know someone, and you really want to. Starting a family is such a big deal that you want to give it the proper amount of time. So that's really where it was coming from. But yeah, when I started really thinking about it and doing that math, I almost started panicking and just felt like, okay, I need an insurance policy. It's not that I felt like I am approaching not being able to have children. I lead a very healthy lifestyle, and I feel like I've taken good care of those things and like did all the things right in terms of gynecologist appointments and having my fertility checked and all of those things. So it wasn't that I felt like I was going to lose time.
Cut you off, but I want to acknowledge that because a lot of women don't get their fertility checked.
Yeah. This is very true. And I think that there is still a lot of education to be done about this topic in particular.
Yes.
Honestly, the only reason I did it, I don't think I would have thought about it as a single woman. And the reason I did it is because in the marriage that I was in, we were actually preparing to start a family. And I sort of just wanted to cover my bases and make sure everything was good to go. My hormones are balanced, because I had a lot of issues with my hormones throughout my life, and including like a PCOS diagnosis at one point. So just wanted to like kind of cover my bases with it. But had it not been for preparing to start a family with this person that I thought I was going to do that chapter with, I don't know that I would have even had the test. It's an AMH test that I'm talking about, as you know. But I think that anyone who is who's single and not really planning a family or thinking so much about their fertility, it's not really top of mind. It's not top of mind like it is like getting a pap smear. Especially, these things are really top of mind for us in the Western part of the world. But I had been living in the Middle East for the last 7 years, and it's way less top of mind. There's way less education in that part of the world. Yeah. And like you said earlier, I think there is such a huge gap here still. And I think it should be talked about. I've had so many women on the podcast that even their gyno has not, you mentioned checking for fertility, even if they're in their later 30s or, and there was this research study that a good percentage of doctors feel like it's not their obligation to share about egg freezing. Really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And wow. Okay. Yeah. I wish there was more conversation about it, whether it's coming from the medical industry, or medical professionals, or whether it's coming from friends and family. But I do think that most of the time for a woman to know about this, it's because she has a friend that had gone through something similar, or, you hear it through the grapevine. It's a word of mouth thing. It's not that we're taught these things. It's not that the education is right in front of us and we have these constant reminders. It's not part of, it's not part of the normal game plan when it comes to your feminine health.
No, it's not. And it's really, hopefully, part of the intention of this podcast too is to cultivate more conversation and hopefully fill some gap of that information, because, for a lot of women, they're finding out too late, which is so unfortunate. I think there are a lot of things that we could do preventatively, or even just knowledge we can have to be armed with, the ability to make a good choice for ourselves. And it's just, I have a huge frustration for where we are right now in terms of our education or conversations around these things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but I do think it's changing. I think, people like you, especially, like there's a lot of these kinds of conversations happening, which I think is fantastic. But there are also there are also companies and brands that are doing exciting things in this space. And I think one thing that I've picked up on is, I sort of feel like in the general health space, there has been a movement in our lifetime around, especially with our generation, sort of taking more ownership of our own health and getting informed so that we're not just relying on a doctor to say, you need to do this and you need to do that. We really take a lot of ownership for that. And we have the information and the tools and resources available to help us do that. And I feel like there's the wave of that coming when it comes to feminine health as well.
I agree with you. And I'm hopeful for that. And I'm thankful for that. I do agree with you there.
Yeah. It's really great to see that. And, it's, right now, I still think the industry is very much like the broader healthcare industry with clinics and doctors, but there are brands that are taking a more tech approach to it, which there's Fertility. I think that's a UK company. There's Kindbody that's based in the US. There's Ovasave in the Middle East, and they are providing women with information and better access to solutions to help them through this process. And I think the things that we need are first and foremost the education and just having these conversations become more prolific and more regular and normalized. But then it's also a sort of facilitating the process of, how do you find the right clinic? How do you know what is the right way to go for you? Just making the whole process easier. And I think we really, really need that. It's allowing women to take ownership of their fertility and reproductive health. And I think it's really, really great to see that happening.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just to have these resources and again, these conversations to make something that can be so overwhelming, less overwhelming. And I think that's important because, I want to get to your journey, but it can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, that is such a good word for it. It really is.
So I'm so curious about, because and I'd love for you to speak to this as well. You froze in Spain, if I have that right. Is that correct?
I did. Yes. Yeah,
I did. About your decision to freeze there.
Yes, sure. So I was living in Dubai, sort of in the process of moving out and kind of putting all my things in storage. And that was the point where I was thinking about, okay, I should really start freezing my eggs. So I had gone to Madrid. I have what feels like a home base there because that was where I moved when I left the US. I was there for a year and a half before being in Dubai. So I have a wonderful group of friends that feel like family there. And it's just a second home to me. So I was visiting around Christmas time. So at the end of 2022. And I spoke to a couple of girlfriends about how I was thinking about doing it. And they had gone through the process in Madrid. And so I thought, let me get the clinic recommendations from you. Let me look into it. And I realized that the cost of freezing your eggs was so much less there than in the UAE or in the US, significantly less.
Is it? So yeah, because that's one thing we talk a lot about on here is the cost. It's so expensive. And fortunately, as we're talking, there's progress being made, more companies are covering it. But if you don't have the coverage, it's tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't have coverage. This was going to be completely out of pocket. I think there are certain parts of the world where it is that are more progressive when it comes to providing coverage for this type of thing, but not where I was living at the time, not my health insurance. So yeah, it just kind of planted the seed for me having those conversations with a couple of girlfriends who had done it there. And when I started did the math and comparisons of where I could possibly do it, where would I be comfortable doing it? It was the most cost-effective option. But I also, the more research I did, I was finding that Spain is really a hotbed in Europe for fertility treatments. And some of the most advanced clinics in the region are out of Spain. So it just gave me a lot of confidence that, this is the right place for me financially. Having the home base there is a level of comfort. I really wanted to do it with a clinic that someone else I know had referred me to.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, sort of familiarity or trust, someone else that it's been there. And again, when it's so overwhelming, you definitely need to root into those things.
Yeah, it's very true. But at the same time, because I knew so little about what to expect, I would say I like blindly trusted it in a way, like, oh, like she went through the process. It was a good experience for her. So I can be comfortable with it without really, really lifting up the hood as much as I should have. And I would say I was happy with the clinic that I used, and it was a good, my experience with the clinic overall was good. My experience with egg freezing was very challenging, but, I was lucky, but I knowing now, had I known back then what I know now about the process, I wish that I would have done a lot more research and had more conversations.
What did you feel like? That's a really great point, because I think a lot of women go in expecting one thing and have a very different experience. And I think even doing more research, it can be hard to know exactly what it's going to be like. But what did you wish you knew more about, or what do you wish you had researched more?
I think not so much research that I would have done, Googling different clinics, but just taking more time to talk to the doctors and like go in person and have conversations. And the reason I say that is there were, when you go to doctor's appointments, sometimes like you feel like it's just very operational and very transactional. You don't get a lot of time with the doctor. It's like you want them to like talk to you more. You want them to like open up your files more and like really dig into your medical history so that you can feel confident that like they're super invested in your case and they know everything that they need to know to recommend and do the right thing for you. And there were, in addition to that, there was also, I made sure that it was an English speaking doctor, because I speak Spanish, but not medical terminology. Like it's more like just basic conversational.
As like speaking the same language sometimes. I had a doctor one time that literally spoke to me medical jargon the whole time. I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. And he's speaking English to me. Like, yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. And so that was another thing that I wish I would have done a little bit differently. There was definitely a language barrier. Yes, the doctor spoke English, but it was broken. And it was like, when I was trying to understand the technical things, like very, very good advanced medical terminology, like that, it was very hard. And I think the worst moment for me when it comes to the language barrier was waking up after my second procedure, where I had, this was definitely like the crux of the difficult part of the process for me. And waking up and finding out that the procedure had failed and they had gotten 0 eggs when I was expecting. I had 15 follicles that were the right size going into it. And I woke up to we got 0, and I could not understand what had happened. There was like, the doctor was, I knew that she really was, she was like emotionally invested in this, and she really wanted to help me. And she was just desperately trying to explain it in the right way. But it made it really, really difficult to not really be able to have that right kind of conversation about what had happened and what's going to happen from here and all of that. It just made it added a layer of complexity that I did not need in those moments.
Oh gosh, so I can imagine the devastation of, and it's weeks of shots and medication and I can't imagine that devastation. Oh.
Yeah. So that's where the language barrier came in. But then back to the point of the time spent, the personalized attention, I think it's just so important. Like going through this process, I thought I knew everything I needed to know about it. But then as I was going through it, so many questions kept arising, and I just wanted more time with the doctor. I wanted more time to like really have things thoroughly explained to me. And I wanted to feel like, okay, like they're really, really taking the time to understand me and how I'm reacting to the drugs and what's happening in my body. And I came back, I took a break after the second one failed. The doctor said, this is what happened.
Back up to the first one. Mm-hmm. How was that for you? The first round?
Sure.
So you did 3 in total.
3 rounds in total. Yes.
Okay. And the first one, what was that like for you in terms of like, emotionally, what were you feeling? How did your body handle the medication?
Yeah.
Did you have someone helping you do shots? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah. Well, I was super positive going into it. I went to Spain, like just feeling very optimistic. This is going to be easy, one and done. And, the one of the harder parts of that first round was the very first shot I had to do. I was like alone in my hotel room, and I had my two best friends on a Zoom call with me. One of them is a nurse, and they were like very, very like calming me down, but also like, just do it, get it over. Like you got this, Bex. And they were such amazing cheerleaders. So like that first shot, like getting over that hurdle was super monumental. But then the rest of it, like once I did the first shot, I was like, okay, I can do this. There were a few times I had friends help me, because no matter how many times I did it, it was still hard every time.
And you're like, I did it so many years ago now, but like, and Rob helped me with a lot of it, but it's like the mixing of the medication. It's like a whole like science experiment kind of.
Yeah. Like you need a degree for this. I shouldn't be.
It's so nerve-wracking. It's so nerve-wracking because you also like don't want to fuck it up. You're just like, I want to make sure I do this right. Yeah. It's so nerve-wracking.
Yeah. You don't want to miss a drop. It is hard. It's very tricky. But like the first treatment it just felt very smooth sailing, and I was expecting more changes in my body. I wasn't feeling a lot. Then I was like, okay, this is pretty easy. Then when it was, I was like leading up to, I was like days away from having the first procedure. The follicle count wasn't what we were expecting. They just weren't growing. So I had, they said, I think I had 8 that they had counted. And so I still went into the first procedure thinking, okay, like I could still get pretty good results. But I woke up to only 4 of them having been frozen and viable. So that was the first real break in the whole experience. Was just it was such a letdown. I was I had this number of 12 in my mind. Yeah, like this is the target, and I really had an expectation that I was going to get like very close to that, if not more, in the first round. And so, 4, I was like, this is just such a disappointment, because I didn't feel like I really put my body through so much, but my expectations were just way off. Like there was no management of expectations. And I think that's a lot of what's missing in this space, and coming from the medical professionals. It's like, you could be on one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum. You could get nothing, or you could get 30. It's all over the place. So I think I wish that I had gone into it knowing that was a possibility.
It's really hard to know. And I think, it's hard to know. I feel like what's missing is, the managing of expectations, information. I feel like in my own experience, and this is very nerve-wracking, but I just put an episode out 2 weeks ago sharing my fertility journey and where I'm at. And I've had losses, and I've only found out more after that. And it's like, why didn't I know any of this before? And it's really, we have to be our own detectives. We have to be our own like self-advocates to figure this stuff out. And it's so unfortunate. And again, hopefully we're moving in the right direction, that like as women, we have to like learn this stuff after a disappointing experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't quite know why that is. I don't know why there's so much optimism or rainbow colored glasses, rose colored glasses, I think it is. When it comes to
rainbows or roses or whatever.
Yeah. But when it comes to setting someone up for what to expect, it's that you're not getting the full picture. So that's definitely what happened.
Yeah. And I wonder why that is too. I'm only left to like, people are uncomfortable talking about uncomfortable things. I don't know. But in these experiences and situations, I think nothing should be left unsaid.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree.
Okay. So obviously then you go on to do a second. When you heard that number, did you know in that moment, like, I'm going to try this again? Or did you have to take some time to process? What was your
I knew right away. And the doctor was really quick to have those conversations with me. And she basically said this, your body just the drugs were too light for you. Like your body didn't respond super well to the doses that we gave you. So we're going to do it again. And we're going to go a little bit more aggressive with the hormones next time. So I wasted no time. I moved right into the second round without taking a break, which is another learning. I wish I had given my body a break in between. And I think there are different schools of thought when it comes to that. If it's okay to do it back to back, or if you should really space them out. And I think it's probably just a matter of listening to your body. And I guess because the first one was sort of like lower dosage and it didn't feel that extreme on my body, I felt like it was okay to do a second one. But doing it back to back and then having a more aggressive approach with the medication, it was like the pendulum swung in the opposite direction a little bit too far. And my body, it was too much for my body. And I had a really, really tough time. I was in a lot of pain. I like crazy swelling. Just all of the symptoms were to the extreme degree for me. And then I also had some, I have a venous insufficiency in my legs. So I have already existing issues with my circulation and swelling in my lower limbs. And so it created a really high risk for me of blood clots. And so in addition to all of the hormones, then I had to start taking blood thinners, and I was having just extreme pain in my legs and very bad swelling. Gosh. So just like, I went from like no symptoms to everything hitting me really hard. Yeah. So
and how were you feeling emotionally in that second round, it being a lot harder on your body?
That's when things got really, really tough. So my second round was before and after the procedure were some of the toughest moments for me. My emotions were extremely high. I was really, really struggling with the physical impact of it. And I just could not wait. I couldn't wait for that round to be over, but I kept telling myself, I think what got me through the upfront part of the process was I'm getting a lot more eggs this time. Like the follicle count was so high, and I was like, it's going to be worth it. Like I will only, after this round, I'll have everything I need and probably more than the 12 target that I was hoping for. So that when the procedure failed, which happened because I had my progesterone spiked in the 11th hour. And when your hormones are not in balance, it prevents the eggs from reaching a stage of maturity. So the follicles were there, but the eggs were not extractable. Okay. So they were like stuck inside of the follicle essentially. So, and it was just because of like a hormone imbalance, and it's probably a result of just like, this was all way too much on my body and my body reacted poorly. So, like having those high hopes and like what I put myself through made it more devastating when I woke up and found out that it had failed.
Yeah. And that's what's so hard is, and we've talked about this too here, and I've lived it, like the question of worth, like what is it all worth? And we're putting our bodies, our emotions, our mental health, our physical health through all these things with this hopeful outcome. And when we don't get the outcome, it's like, it is still all worth it, but it's so hard to wrap your head around that in the moment when you hear that devastating news. And, I recently suffered a miscarriage, and it was like shots and doctor's appointments and blood works and all the things. And what keeps you going is like, I'm doing this for a reason. There's a big why to this. And then, you have a loss, and it's just like, oh my God, it feels like all for nothing.
Yeah, it really did. It felt like my world was shattered, but I had to remind myself constantly that part of the way that I'm feeling is the chemistry in my body. Like this is it's the hormones. Oh, yeah. And I really tried to tell myself that often, but I also reminded myself that my circumstances are not that bad. Like this is an insurance policy. This is a protective mechanism at the end of the day. This is not, it's not my one chance to have children, right? This is, I still have the ability to conceive, as far as I know, and like that could still happen. Like this is just sort of the backup plan. Yeah. So I really had to keep putting it into perspective in that way. And
I think that's the only thing that gets you through sometimes is your mindset, and really having a healthy mindset. Otherwise, I mean, you could be in a hole for a really long time, and it can be, not to say that that's easy to do, but I think and as a therapist, of course, this is where I focus, like the mental emotional piece is so important, and what we're saying to ourselves about our circumstances shapes the experience 100%. So I think that's amazing that you were able to like ground yourself in that mindset.
Yeah, it was really hard at times. I would say some days I definitely failed at it, and I was just miserable and felt sorry for myself. And I had to really pick myself up out of that. But one thing that also really played a role in how I dealt with the whole experience was the connection I made with my community on Instagram specifically. I was openly sharing my journey on my Instagram page, and so many women reached out and shared their own journeys. A lot of them were just sending positive vibes and just really encouraging messages. But it was the ones that shared what they had been through that really impacted me and put things into perspective. Like what happened to me did not hold a candle to what other women had been through.
I mean, I felt the same exact thing after going through what I went through. And I'm like, my heart goes out. I mean, it's all devastating, but there are women that have gone through this for years, and women are very strong and resilient. Yeah. I think that there's so much power in the sharing.
Absolutely. It really got me through it. And, here I was, I chose this city because I had a great support system there, but there were still a lot of days that I was alone. I didn't have a friend. I didn't have a family member that was there with me all the time. And the people that I had there, like they have lives and they have jobs, and they weren't just there to be with me. So there were a lot of moments of solitude, and I wish that I had someone that was like really present with me and by my side. But when I didn't have that, I had my community to lean into, and it truly made all the difference. They really got me through it.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful community. Is such an amazing thing. I think we all need that connection and that support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is very true.
So you finish round 2, you kind of pick yourself back up. Do you go right into round 3? Do you, at this point, take a break?
Yeah, at this point, I decided to pause. I knew that my body needed a break, and I also wanted to give it some time to decide, do I really want to put myself through this again? Because coming out of that, I was not feeling good about it. I was like, nah, this is way too much. I don't know if I can go through this again. A few weeks went by, and after I'm feeling better, I'm thinking, okay, I really should. Like I did this for a reason. Let me reach my goal, or at least get closer to it. I can go through this one more time. So I think I took 2 full months off before starting the 3rd round. And the doctor had said, okay, we realized that, we went a little bit more aggressive with the medication the second time. Your body did not respond well to it, especially with your circulatory issues. We need to go back to what we did for you in the first round. And you might only get a couple of eggs at a time. So it might require several more rounds. We'll see. So
how did you feel about her suggestion to go back to the first protocol?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy to hear that, but I was listening to my body, and I knew that what I injected into myself the second time around was way too much. I knew I didn't want to experience that again. So I was fine with going back to the first one. And I just thought to myself, okay, I have to accept it. This is part of the process. At least I know what it's going to feel like. So I waited 2 months, started again, and it was no major hiccups. I had a little bit of a higher count than the first time, and when I did the procedure, they were able to freeze 6 of them. So I had 4, 0, and 6, 10 in total, and I decided to stop there.
Are you happy with that?
Ish. There is, I would say more recently, a part of me that is thinking about doing one more round. And yeah, it's coming from I recently met a founder she's building a fertility femtech brand in the Middle East. And she had her own experience with egg freezing, and she's now on I think she just finished her 5th round. She is up to like 28 eggs, something like that. And so having the conversation with her and, how many times she's been through it kind of got me thinking about it again. Like maybe I should just do one more round, try to get a couple of more just to have a better backup plan. I don't know. I'm very much on the fence about it. I just started thinking about it a couple of days ago, but, it's nice to know.
It's such a personal decision. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. But I have 10. That's a good little security blanket. But I still have a lot to think about.
You may never need them. It's sort of this unknown. You may never even need them.
Right. Exactly. That's true. Yeah. So there was a point we were talking about earlier that when we kind of got derailed about my first round and my second round, we didn't come back to, and that was about the personalized attention.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where this sort of came into play in my experience was after my second round. Like the doctor had conversations with me about like how the approach that she wanted to take, doing it for a 3rd time. And when I took a 2-month break and then I came back, and when I met with the doctor again to start the 3rd round, it was as if the conversation never happened. And like, she had completely forgotten that I had this circulatory issues, and completely like forgotten about the approach that we were talking about taking. And I'm glad that I wrote things down, and I was like really taking ownership of it, because I had to be the one in the office to say, no, that like we talked about doing it this way. We can't do it similar to the second time around because this happened. So I just think it's A, that shouldn't have happened, but B, this is a case in point why women really need to own this stuff for themselves and be educated and informed.
It's so upsetting, and it is so frustrating, because I don't feel like we should have to do this and when we're in such vulnerable circumstances. And it's just frustrating because I've lived that too. And I just feel like it's such a disservice to women that are going through these fertility journeys that are overwhelming, they're challenging, they're emotional. And then on top of that, we have to research, we have to ask the questions. Mm-hmm. Like, I've done such a deep dive after my miscarriage, and it's been overwhelming, like maybe too much. And even, as a therapist, I tell my clients not to do this. But of course I do it myself. And Rob was like, you need to like chill. And I'm like, I can't. I need to know the questions to ask. Like, I need to have the knowledge, because I didn't my first transfer. I didn't know the questions to ask. So I was just like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that. Oh, my thyroid's high. You're telling me that's fine. Okay. But I'm so proud of you. And that's so amazing that you had your voice and you reminded the doctor, which you shouldn't have had to. But if you didn't do it, then what?
Yeah. And I guess the way that I look at it, I think any doctor has a responsibility to make sure they're really well informed, but they're human also at the end of the day. And I know that this doctor was like, she was so emotional about like when I woke up from the second procedure, she had tears in her eyes. I knew it was breaking her heart. So I genuinely felt like she really cared and she was invested in my case, but it's like, everybody's human. Like they're not going to do things perfectly. Like they could overlook something. So that's, it doesn't mean they're a bad doctor. Like whether they're invested or not, you need to be the one to really, be in the driver's seat on all of these things for yourself, because you can't just like let go and let somebody else take the wheel when it's your own body and your own fertility and your future.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Cause I think, and where we started this conversation is like, taking the wheel on our own lives and not listening to anybody else. So I think it's like, it is still about being in the driver's seat. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. To bring it full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of share where you are now, where life is for you. I know you just shared you're maybe thinking about another round. Kind of where are you now? And maybe we'll end on what you would share, what you would want to pay forward after everything that you've been through. And that's what I try to think about when I've gone through these hard experiences, is like, how can I then help someone else? And maybe there's a bigger meaning or purpose for me going through this. And I've certainly learned a lot after my last two, failed transfers that I want to continue to share and pay forward.
Yeah. So life has really, this experience that I went through last year, and I have a daily journal that I write. It's a gratitude journal, and there's one page for every day of the year, and there's like 5 sections. So like when I write on the April 10th day, I can actually see what I wrote April 10th last year and April 10th the year before.
That's awesome.
So I was reading back, and today last year was when I started my second round of egg freezing. So it's 1 year later, and I physically, like where I am, I'm in Bali right now, and I've been, like I mentioned, just living a fully remote life for the last almost year and a half. And my professional base is still out of Dubai. So that's where I had, before packing up and living on the road, I was in Dubai for 7 years working in the tech and startup space. And I have been in the last few months in sort of a transitional phase where I have been wanting to take a step back from the tech space and figure out a way to direct my career on a path that's more meaningful and mission driven, and something that really resonates with me personally. I had been working in HR tech and fintech. I liked the work and the people that I was working with, but just wasn't resonating with me the way that I really wanted it to. So,
but isn't that so fun? I love that. Like this, like life has seasons, and being able to pivot and not having to stay with the one thing. I've been a therapist for so many years now, and now I'm doing that. I love that. I love that. And that's, again, being like in tune with ourselves. I think it's an amazing thing to shift and to pivot.
Yeah. So what happened, I sort of decided when I was writing my goals in the beginning of the year, I said, I want to steer my career in a different direction, in a direction that really resonates with me, and just sort of like I waited for a sign or something to fall into place. And I recently went back to Dubai, where I needed to have some meetings and kind of figure things out while I was there on ground. And I had done a collaboration with a femtech brand based in the Middle East called Ovasave. I mentioned them before. And I had done some UGC content for them, just wanting to support. I love what the brand is doing. And when I got to Dubai, I met the founder. We had a coffee because we realized, and working together on this content piece, that we had a lot of parallels, very similar stories and very similar experiences with egg freezing. So I met her for coffee, and one thing led to another. And because I have a background in tech and marketing and brand building, and she's been looking for someone to help on the marketing side, I am now working with this brand. So this is, it really came full circle. Like,
oh, that's so amazing.
Yeah. This area of my life, like the egg freezing, is something that was just very, very deeply personal to me. And I was very passionate about wanting to share my story and educate other women. And then also over here wanting to make a change in my career. And the two things really came together.
Isn't that amazing? So, I love that.
Yeah.
That's exciting. You'll have to share more with us offline that we can post too about this company. I'm obviously happy to support in any way possible.
Great.
Okay, one piece of advice you'd want to pay forward to women, maybe thinking about egg freezing or have gone through a round and thinking about another round. Some words of wisdom or piece of advice.
Yeah, I think it's maybe more of the overall takeaway that we have been talking about almost this entire conversation, and that is just to follow your own path and really take ownership for yourself in your own life. There are so many different paths that a woman can follow, and one person might be really happy with settling down in her early or mid-20s and just starting a family right away. Someone else might be wanting to do a lot of different things with her career and other aspirations. And those things can take time. And you also don't know when you're going to meet someone. So I think it's really, really a good thing to just give yourself the option and the freedom, like take away the time pressure.
Yes.
So I think like consider freezing your eggs is one piece of advice. Like check your fertility. Don't wait for something to happen, or don't wait until it's too late. Like actually be proactive, get it checked. This really should be as common as breast checks and as common as pap smears, really. But also, if you decide to do that, just advocate for yourself. Like don't just entirely rely on a doctor to take the reins and tell you what to do. Do your research, know what's going on, like really own the process and be at the driver's seat.
I love that. Be in the driver's seat. Drive your own car in your own lane and be in the driver's seat. I think that's like a good message. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and sharing your story. I know it's going to be so helpful for other women to hear it.
Yeah, it was really my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And it was wonderful to meet you and have this conversation.
You as well. So wonderful.
You guys, I do not get on a flight anymore without my Bombas compression socks. They are a travel staple for me, especially on longer flights. The socks help improve blood flow from your legs to your heart, which obviously is so essential. I just love these socks so much, and I want you guys to have an opportunity to check out these socks too. So use our code QTC20 for 20% off your first purchase of Bombas. Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod.